Son. Okay, we discuss we start the discussion with the question of what is this crisis of the humanities about, and we basically wonder if it was only about the university budget division or the assignment of limited budgets, and or if it was an issue of a matter of grant opportunities or an issue of what the universities want the courses to be on, or what does the universities want to be discussed in the courses I meant, okay? And Christian also bring a point of the students' fees, or is this crisis moved because of the students' fees? And you have probably students that are not as rich as other students that are studying hard sciences, interested in humanities programs, but they cannot afford, to be in the program because of the university fees. Or is it about the commercialization of universities? And you can jump in and correct me, okay, in any point. We also talk about the concern that is, in the academy about translation. This is a point that Steve brought in, I think, yeah. There is a concern in the academy about translation and how professors should or should not be connected to the external community overall. And that external, I put it in quotes because that's a concept I'm always against to. I don't want to see myself as an academic and in opposition to the community. I want to be part of that community, not an insider, as in opposition to an external community. And we also talk about how the industry read what I don't even can read my own words, but okay. How's the industry returning, okay, to the academy in order to, or in the search for content, and this is also a point that Steve brought in, okay. Sometimes the industry comes back to the academy in order to get content produced for blogs or for websites, and how that can be understood as free labor or as a way in which the university is subsidizing, or the public system is subsidizing the private system. And another point that we touched was that in order to get tenure, as you can see, we touched a lot of points. Okay, in order to get tenure, we have to be involved, or we are not exactly required, but that's like a category. That we can use to get points in order to get tenure. Now, I'm talking about academic service and professional service or community service, and there are politics in this, as Xiao commented, and it also depends in who are your students, how is your student body structure, or that's the question. Who are we teaching to? And I think Juan made a point at the last meeting talking about that we have to question the interculturality and how the diversity. Am I right or not? Am I right or not? Let me write it directly from here. Diversifying the question about who we are teaching. What are we doing research on to be a priority to address issues of the crisis in the humanities? Am I right, or well, you can expand on this later. And the last point was that on top of these questions that we were making, okay, we have to count the constraints that some universities presents to academics, for example, in terms of labor and research, and in terms of tenure requirements. And I think Christian, is that his name? Yeah, Christian brought out, he came up with an example of the University of California at Merced and a particular certification that, in which the university limit the type of work that you can do research in.
What I really appreciated was that we also started raising the extent to which there was a certain built-in UC system bias in our scope, that we started talking about how the system here in California is ranked. UC systems at the top, Cal State systems below that, two-year system below that, and just in talking about and Thea and I offered some perspective on this from our point of view of teaching at two-year colleges or private colleges that are more geared toward technical concerns, and I think that's an important area. I also was bringing up in the whole talking with Juan, we were talking about that two-year colleges, talking about the engagement with the community, that two-year colleges are sort of inherently kind of or can be inherently sort of geared toward that, just by the nature of the student body, by the nature of the need to collaborate with local schools, that I think the humanities have to look at ways of recreating our constituency and embracing the fact that high school teachers of humanities are often not teaching it in ways that are going to encourage their kids, especially low-income kids, to be asking the kind of questions that we at this level of the humanities are sort of trying to ask. So, recreating our constituency, I think, in the collaboration with education and with the arts, from my perspective, is a useful point of intervention for a lot of the problems we're trying to address.
I want to add two quick points. One, I made the point that my spiel about interculturality had to be complemented by that of interdependence, or a global awareness of our interconnectedness and interdependence, that it is at the confluence of interculturality and interconnectedness and interdependence that I see some of the interesting issues arising. That's one point. And the other one is that about the need to diversify our understanding of what the challenges of the humanities are, depending on the kind of institutions you're talking about, because the taken for granted platform that we were using de facto in our conversation was that this knowledge and these humanities are located in research universities, and the reality of life for most people who do academic work is that they are not in class 1 research universities. So one of the issues then that stems from this understanding, more diversified understanding of the different nature of institutions and thus of the different nature of publics and institutional missions, is that perhaps one of the challenges of the humanities is to convince the students that need the most the humanities for a critical understanding of their own forms of oppression and their own situation, is to convince those students that the humanities are relevant to their lives whenever we can get our hands on them, which is not always, especially not for the lower classes. But when we can, one challenge is, how do I convince you that what I'm trying to teach you will eventually become relevant for your own self-understanding, for your own critical self-understanding, so that you can be more critical about the ways in which you've been constituted by society and sort of pre-programmed to fulfill a class mission.
I have Carolyn here to help me read my notes. Okay. Well, I think we started our conversation definitely coming off of the final exchange between Juan and David, and also I think, I don't know, like this room being haunted by Derrida. We really took it pretty literally at first, I noticed, and thought about whose humanities as a question, you know, like what was kind of implied by even posing it that way. And we went through a lot of stuff in the process. And at first we simply questioned, you know, humanities as something that isn't simply a division within the university, but something that is formed out of a slew of everyday practices. So we tried to kind of complicate that. And then we also kind of started thinking a lot about what types of subjectivities were implied by the question, the mode of address even, whose humanities. And we were all really excited about the fact that there was even the possibility to ask ourselves that question, that this isn't just the humanities as ours. There is no other to address, you know, like there is no, you know, need to form this as a question. So, and we talked about all the different subjects that we think make this question possible and necessary. And some of those were exciting subjects, like subjects who were, entering into, critical humanities in the university for first time or more visible, in more visible manners and stuff like that. And then we started getting a little pessimistic, as we're prone to do. And we started to think about what other types of subjects kind of haunt this who's humanities, because like humanities is at risk. What is it? And we kind of came up with, this is really cheesy, but guys, I have to say it out loud. We came up with the possibility of the question of who's conshumanities, because we felt like the issue of the consumer replacing the student, and the fact that in our everyday teaching practices we walk into classrooms time and time again where we're not encountered by students, we're encountered by people who want to consume a chunk of knowledge that we're delivering to them in very different ways than maybe we encountered in our own ways, in our own educations, undergraduate educations or otherwise. So the conshumanities was kind of a question we had. We also kind of thought back to, I don't know, beyond John Hartley and the figure of the consumer citizen and all the problematics of that. We started to think about some of the other ways people have addressed this over the past 2 weeks, and we came to Dick Hebdige and kind of the way that, as at the level of the bureaucrat, he kind of got us thinking about our responsibility, and this is coming off of David's rhetoric, to not necessarily answer questions like that or other types of questions about our value within the university or the world at large. Like, how do we resist answering those sorts of questions in ways that are productive and force other types of questions, to the forefront, so that we're not always answering, we're good because ... And that often being, we're good because we teach people how to socialize and be civil, and, we know the story, so I won't go all over that again. And then finally, we started thinking after that about the question of translating value, though, and why that's a really awesome thought experiment. Like, how do we get, bureaucrats to ask different questions and force different kind of power, like relations? How do we also fund a building to have things like this? So how do we translate value, our value, in ways that aren't offensive but still are, I don't know, useful or something on the ground every day? Oh, I don't know. What else? Quantify. Yeah, like how? Oh, that's right. In lieu of the creative industries and the way that they're thinking of value in qualitative and not quantitative ways, how do we learn from, like, Mick Robbie's critique of that, but also how do we learn positive things from that? Like, how do we translate our value in light of the models that they're, that we're, they provide us with? Is that maybe?
Yeah, we kept returning to the question how to deal with the deep entanglement between humanities and the market. And we didn't really know how to solve the tensions that arise through this entanglement, as how to really start a productive discourse between business studies, marketing studies, management studies, and humanities that goes somehow beyond what John Hartley was presenting us, and that goes beyond just the incorporation of humanities within some kind of business logic. But we also noticed that some kind of market logic is also prevalent in the humanities themselves, as they have to always some kind of argue their value within the academy that is also very much driven by a market logic, and that we another thing Sahana addressed is that humanities also often have to answer some kind of tensions that arise within the market, and has to some kind of provide cultural capital for workers, for instance in India, and yeah.
That's true. There was the humanities, like in terms of these IT campuses. Is that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just that point is already made. I was actually, both William and I, we started off saying that humanities could be useless, and humanities is a luxury in some countries. That we cannot afford humanities departments, and they are actually dying down, because the immediate concern is to address, policy questions and redistribution and, helping the government to manage. So that's one point. But I was just kind of, very inspired by the argument between David and Juan, and I was just thinking that universal subject and difference may not be the only possibilities before us. So humanities probably should explore how other traditions have looked at the universal subject. So the universal subject itself, it is not just in the Western tradition. In the Indian tradition, the universal subject is talked about in a completely different way, where this person is first enveloped by his immediate neighborhood, then by his immediate society, then by the region, then by the state, then by the nation, and then by the world, and then by the universe. So it's layers of progressive encompassment or progressive enveloping, which is a completely different discourse altogether about the universal subject, and the approach or the intentions or the optimism is kind of same that we see in some of the Western traditions. So in fact, in India, in some of the institutes who have money, the humanities are busy doing this, digging out the Indian traditions and seeing how the universal subject is, different from the Western discourse of the universal subject. And I'm sure it would be very different in the in China, for example. And this is one way to understand subjectivity and universal subject. Done.
I think we're done.
I'm speaking for the third group. I'll try to be finished by 1. See if I can do it.
By the way, that clock's 5 minutes slow.
Oh, okay. Well then. I think for the most part I represent what was a group of people who are in the later years of graduate school, so we're all looking toward the job market. So we had sort of a myopic discussion about the job search and about the way it relates to labor and interdisciplinarity. And we talked about the precarious nature of interdisciplinarity for graduate students, and how it might be a very different term for graduate students from what it is for people who've already gotten jobs teaching. And we talked about how interdisciplinarity is so often located in the body of the scholar rather than in a department where people from different disciplines interact with each other, and how much stress that puts on people to learn things that are outside of their area of knowledge. We talked about a bunch of stuff about the job market, but I'll be brief and end with 2 suggestions. One, the U.S. News and World Report just came out with its 2009 rankings, which includes rankings of economic diversity and ethnic diversity. So maybe at lunch, check that out, see what it says. And 2, it might be a good idea if we read Andrew Ross's essay about the global university. That might give us some ideas about the future of the humanities in American institutions and institutions abroad. Anybody else want to add something?